Thank you very much. It's great to be here talking with you all today on a topic that has become increasingly important during this pandemic, both here in the United States and also around the world. So the topic I'm going to discuss today is trends in indoor air quality. And the first thing I want to do is begin by talking about AHRI. I represent AHRI. I'm a Vice President of Public Affairs. AHRI is the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute, which is the trade association for manufacturers of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, commercial refrigeration, and water heating products. We have 320 some member companies, which represent over 95% of all the HVACR products manufactured and installed in North America. It's also we also represent about 70 to 75% of all the HVACR and water heating products manufactured and installed around the world. So it is a very large and influential association in the HVACR world. We are a major standards developer. We have 102 standards and guidelines in use around the world. We also have a very large and very influential performance certification program with over 900 participants around the world. And that's one of our key pillars. Our members manufacture residential and commercial central air conditioners, heat pumps, and components. We represent residential and commercial furnaces, boilers, and water heaters. Residential, commercial water heaters and components, and commercial refrigeration equipment and components as well. So today I want to discuss, as I mentioned, trends in indoor air quality. And as we all know, the pandemic has kind of put the spotlight on viral transmission routes, how this virus is transmitted from humans to humans as well as from surfaces to humans. And our industry has been called upon and has stepped up to respond with innovation and information on this issue. And then I also want to talk about where we go from here. So our industry is taking the center stage as interest in IAQ surges. And that means that we are called upon by organizations, by government entities, by non-governmental organizations, and by the media to talk about how our industry can help keep people safer during this time of, very much uncertainty regarding viral transmission. Now, it's normally a good thing to take center stage unless it's unwanted attention. In this case, it was unwanted attention. I mean, we didn't ask to be put in the spotlight, but we can use the opportunity to take advantage of by highlighting the IAQ issues that usually are kind of on the back burner. They're usually among the things that are sort of nice to have if, it's in the budget or if there's space or whatever. But in this case, these are issues that are at the forefront because it is literally a safety issue. It was a flawed Chinese study that cast the spotlight on this issue, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but that was what gave us the opportunity to address this issue in a positive way. The Chinese study was conducted in a restaurant in China, but the study organizers admitted that it was not a scientific study. Basically, what happened was they viewed the statistics from a restaurant or how many people picked up the virus who were eating lunch at this particular restaurant, and they basically, without looking at any of the other factors, decided that the air conditioner was what had spread this virus around. That was picked up by the US media. It was also inexplicably picked up by our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and put on their website. So that really disseminated this story and, put us in the spotlight because of the potential role of our industry's equipment in disseminating pathogens. No study has thus far proven, no legitimate study has thus far proven the theory that aerosol transmission of this virus is a key way of spreading. but none actually has not either. So we have been working with AHRI particularly, they're one of our sister associations, in making sure that we step up and help people understand the role of our products and equipment in keeping people safe. And that includes, the proper installation and maintenance and use of our products, because it's important for us to protect our credibility and our reputation going forward. AHRI members develop and promote innovative new products, and there's nothing unusual about that. Obviously, we have many, as I mentioned, 320 member companies. They are some of the most iconic brand names in the world. I can't mention them because I could never mention all of them. I can mention Danfoss because this is Danfoss's event. Also, the head of Danfoss North America, John Gallion, is AHRI's chairman this year. So the AHRI board, in response to the interest that this issue generated, approved a multifaceted educational campaign on this issue. And it's aimed first at schools, and then we will turn to commercial buildings, and then we'll turn to recreational spaces as all of these different categories start to open up more and more. We will use paid advertising, earned media, social media, particularly with our partners, and leverage our member companies in spreading the word on this important issue. So it begins with a paper. We developed a paper called Anatomy of a Healthy School. And what this is basically an HVAC primer for safety, comfort, and productivity that those who are responsible for air quality, indoor air quality in schools in this case, can use as a reference. And what we did was we took information from many different sources, from AHRI to the CDC to Harvard University, and compiled it all in one place. And from the paper, we developed the 5 Steps campaign. And this is something that actually has not been launched yet. It is going to be shortly, probably within the next couple of weeks. But so you're seeing all of this for the first time. No one else has seen this information. But the main theme of the campaign is 5 steps for safer schools. And we will be developing ads, mostly digital advertising, in Washington publications, as well as publications geared toward the education community. And the partners that we have lined up are the Air Conditioning Contractors of America, HARDI, which is the distributors, SMACNA, which is the sheet metal contractors, the National Association of Manufacturers, excuse me, the plumbing, heating, cooling contractors, and of course AHRI, which I mentioned earlier, is a key partner of ours. So for the 5 steps, ventilation is the number 1. The paper states that a well-designed modern HVAC system properly installed and maintained will ensure comfort and productivity while ensuring and enhancing health and safety. And the paper does note that the particular unit in the Chinese restaurant did not provide any outdoor air at all, but instead recirculated air within the restaurant. And that goes against the recommendations of the CDC, which recommended increasing ventilation rates, including the percentage of outdoor air. And then that was echoed also by the Harvard School of Public Health, which whose head, Dr. Joseph Allen, recommended bringing in more outdoor air in buildings with heating and ventilation systems, or opening windows in buildings that don't have that. And that helps dilute the airborne contaminants, making infection less likely. You will notice that as things begin to open up, for example, as restaurants began to open up in different areas of our country and around the world, one of the first things that they allowed was outdoor seating. And the reason is because the air outdoors helps dilute airborne contaminants, making infection less likely. So what the ventilation in this case does is make the indoor air also safer. So what might this mean for future buildings? And it's a good question. Obviously, the indoor of all the buildings really is kind of under scrutiny right now, but maybe fresh air will become more important and maybe it'll become more commonplace. Back, really before I was born, it's hard to believe anything was before I was born, but long before I was born, buildings used to have windows that opened. And then they did away with that as, new buildings came online. But perhaps office buildings in the future will be designed with operating windows to help increase the outside air. And maybe an upside of this terrible pandemic will be a healthier populace. Another of the 5 steps is filtration. Building engineers are encouraged to improve the efficiency of the filters that serve their HVAC systems within the guidance provided for most of the building types listed in AHRI's Preparedness Resources website, which I would encourage you all to go to. It's very comprehensive in terms of information on this issue. AHRI recommends that mechanical filter efficiency be at least MERV 13 and preferably MERV 14 to better help mitigate the transmission of infectious aerosols. But the higher efficiency can come with a penalty, and it's important to understand that higher efficiency filters require greater air pressures to drive or force air through the filters. So as the paper notes, care must be taken when increasing the filter efficiency in an HVAC system to verify that the capacity of that system is sufficient to accommodate the better filters without adversely affecting the system's ability to maintain the building's required indoor air temperature and humidity conditions, which I'll get to in a minute, and as well as the space pressure relationships. So what might this mean for future buildings? Well, for one thing, increasing the amount of ventilation and then increasing the filtration can help to erase sick building syndrome. That is something that pops up periodically, certainly in this country, and I assume in other countries as well. It can help slow the spread of all infectious diseases. We have had, pretty much every fall and winter, certainly since I've been born and probably long before that, the flu season, they call it the cold and flu season, and everybody tries to avoid getting the flu and getting the cold. This can help, slow the spread of those pathogens as well. It can reduce employee sick time, and it can reduce overall healthcare costs. So these things are important not just for health and safety issues, but also for economic issues as well. The next of the 5 steps is UV light treatment. That is something that, as this first quote notes, we have struggled in the past to see this highly effective, very safe technology fully implemented for airborne infections. And the New York Times article talks about how UV light works. And as Dr. Nardell from Harvard points out, we've seen the studies and we know it works. And Dr. Bill Bonfleth, who is a Penn State University professor who heads up AHRI's epidemic task force, notes that even HEPA filters that have been tested in the laboratory with viruses will have some level of penetration, a few percent. But if anything gets through, that means you're not perfectly protected. So what UV light treatment does is get those pathogens that do make it through the filter. So it's basically almost a perfect filtration system, if you will. So what might this mean for future buildings? Now, all the benefits listed under the filtration that we talked about, together with ventilation. If you have the ventilation, you have the filtration, and then you have the UV light, it would have all of those benefits, and perhaps in a more sure way. Now, the cost of these can be prohibitive, but future tenants might demand it. I mean, I think, in your own office buildings, if any of you have been back to the office during the pandemic, I think you will see that office buildings have started implementing, taking steps to prevent infection that previously they never would have thought of doing. So it is quite possible that UV light would become an important part of a building's overall effort to contain and prevent spread of disease. The fourth step is humidity control. Viruses are least viable in buildings with humidity between 40 and 60%. Now, it's possible in a building in Washington, D.C., where I am, or Northern Virginia, which is right across the river. It's possible that our building pretty much automatically has between 40 and 60%, except maybe in the dead of winter, because it's a quite humid climate here. But schools in cooler climates are susceptible to having humidity levels lower than optimal. So that means that those school systems might prioritize making humidifiers a necessity. So what might this mean for future buildings? Well, for one thing, less static electricity. If you are like me, when you were in elementary school, you probably used to scuff your feet along the carpeted floor and give your friends shocks. We had great fun doing that. If you did not do that, you missed out. But what that really means is greater occupant comfort in cooler climates. I mean, you will also notice that when you go outside, when it's cool, if the humidity level is relatively high, it feels warmer. It's the same thing inside. So a greater occupant comfort is a result of this. And then also less chance of infection. So the bottom line is schools should prioritize building assessment from the paper. That's what the paper says, that schools should prioritize building assessment through which qualified technicians conduct tests and assessments to determine the appropriate airflows, if spaces within the building, particularly in classrooms and offices and large spaces, are achieving those airflows. And that brings me to a recommendation that I didn't get to in the previous slides, and that is making sure that you hire, that schools in this case hire competent, well-trained contractors and technicians, because it doesn't really matter how effective the equipment is that you're installing. If it is not installed properly, it is not going to work the way it is designed. So that is really the number one thing that everyone should do, is make sure that they hire a well-qualified contractor with well-qualified technicians. It should be well understood that a healthy building, whether it's a school, whether it's an office building or another public space, involves trade-offs of energy use and comfort and safety. And it's important to understand that because sometimes you might have, in the case of filtration, for example, having appropriate air filtration often means keeping the air handling unit on longer than you ordinarily would. So instead of shutting everything down at the end of the school day, for example, and not firing it back up till the next day, you might keep it running all night in some capacity, just to keep that filtration going and keep it going in, replacing the volume of air over a much shorter period of time. So that will require more energy use, for example. So one of the trade-offs that you can use in that situation is when you replace the HVAC system, you replace it with a more efficient unit. So that can help trade off. But in the short term, that can increase energy use, and it can increase costs as well. A properly installed, properly maintained equipment with adequate ventilation using outside air, proper filtration, appropriate humidity control, all of which are accomplished through readily available technologies, can go a long way toward mitigating the potential of viral spread. So that is really sums up what I just discussed over the past several slides, is making sure that all of those things together are in a system that can help mitigate potential viral spread and increase health and safety in schools, and then also in office buildings and other public spaces. So where we go from here? Our industry must continue to present itself as a solution and also widely disseminate its expertise. And one of the main reasons for us undertaking this campaign is that disseminating our expertise and making sure that the folks who need to hear it get the information that they need. We should continue to collaborate both within and outside of the U.S. on health and safety and comfort solutions. Our association is a member of a worldwide association of associations, if you will, and we share information on a regular basis with other associations as well, and that will continue with this issue, just as it does with issues such as refrigerant transition and energy efficiency. We also need to prioritize technician education and training, because as I mentioned earlier, the system is only as good as the person who installs it. You can have the most highly efficient system. You can have, all of the bells and whistles with filtration and UV light and all the ventilation that you need. But if it's not installed correctly and it doesn't work together properly, it is not going to do the job that it was intended to do. So I hope that these previous slides gave you a good idea of how the importance of indoor air quality has risen, certainly here in the U.S. and I assume elsewhere in the world. I hope that all of you, particularly if you are with AHRI member companies, but also if you're with an association that AHRI works with around the world or around the country, that you will join us in helping disseminate this information, because it is absolutely vital to the health and safety, not to mention comfort, of our customers around the world. Thank you.